So this is a video that I've wanted to make, and I've tried to formulate this argument for a while now since the new relationship system has come out, specifically since a few of the new hot patches have happened. I've got a little bit of this is all just background fluff in the back, so you can watch this run instead of looking at my face if you would like to. And I know this video might get some backlash and some people might have different opinions than this, and I think that's totally fine. But really what I wanted to talk about here is how I think the new relationship system has changed the dynamic of how good paths are and how effective wanderers are in the game currently. And I think it's changed it for the better. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it's changed, and then I'm going to talk about why I think it's a good change. And so then, if you've got any comments about this, you can leave them down below. If you disagree with me, if you agree with me, whatever the case is. So what I'm trying to get at here and why I think it's changed the way that paths are in the game currently and how they feel is mostly to do with the new system of cursed and blessed skills and how they can force or at least change the way that you want to play your hero during the course of a run, and can change multiple times through the course of a run because of how relationships are now so fluid and how they re-roll at every in, how they can go up and down pretty easily, and how they're much more RNG based, so they're no longer guaranteed one way or the other per se. It's much more percentage based, and so in that case, it's pretty likely you could go one way versus the other and then switch around and go the other way. And in getting those, you get cursed or blessed skills. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I've made a couple videos on this update already. I will go ahead and link them in the description card above. I've talked about what those patch notes are and my thoughts on those patch notes, and the update overall, so you can go check out those videos if you're not following here. But basically, the way that it works now is that when you get a relationship, the two characters that get a relationship both get a skill that is picked. Seemingly at random. There are some things that affect that. And that's been talked about in patch notes, but it's basically a random skill. And it either gets blessed if it's a good relationship, or it gets cursed, right? If it gets blessed, it's something that you don't have to pick, but it gets a beneficial attribute that every time you use it, it helps out the other hero. If it gets cursed, it gets forced onto your hotbar, so you have to have it. And every time you use it, it causes a negative effect on the hero that you have that relationship with. And so how I think that this has affected paths is that in the past, relationships were very solidified and they had no effect on skills whatsoever. In fact, almost nothing in the game really affected the skills that you chose out of the gate. When you get to the crossroads, you could pick your hero, you could pick their path, right? And if you don't know what a hero path is, essentially it is a modifier to the hero that kind of forces them into a certain skill set, i.e. melee versus ranged, tank versus damage. There's a couple different examples of this, and there are 3 of them on each hero, and they all kind of force a certain play style at the detriment to other play styles. They have buffs for some skills and debuffs at the other. So for like the Highwayman, his sharp shot one, it will buff his range skills while it will debuff his melee skills. So the intent being that you play him as primarily or solely a ranged damage dealer versus a melee damage dealer, which is his other option, right? And so there, this applies to all the different heroes. Some healers, some people might be a healer versus a damage dealer in the case of a Plague Doctor, or maybe support instead of doing damage. I digress. There's quite many of them. So, and the way that the system worked before was that there was very little that would change the way you'd want to play that hero. You could pick their path out the gate, pick their abilities based on that path, and you could lock them into that with a team and never really have to worry about it being an issue, that something would come up that would change that. Now, the biggest one of these that definitely could affect that would be quirks, right? You could get a quirk that would remove say you get Lazy Eye on a Sharpshot Highwayman that lowers his damage and his crit chance on ranged abilities. But that being said, the benefits of that the buff was still generally better than the the debuff from quirks unless you got like a stack of them or something. And quirks are generally fairly easy to remove, and also fairly easy to overcome with an array of trinkets. The other thing that might affect your playstyle would be trinkets, right? Specifically hero trinkets, but there are plenty of other trinkets too, that could affect, like, ooh, this is a really good trinket that kind of favors a melee playstyle versus a ranged playstyle. But those things were very heavily RNG based, very heavily dependent on just you going places, and also you had a lot more selection of them because you can buy them at a store. So generally speaking, you might see it, but you pick a different, better trinket for your build in lieu of that. The current system, the new system, doesn't really give you that choice. It forces a set of abilities on you, whether they're blessed or cursed. And in doing so, it basically is making, in my opinion, it makes paths less viable because of the fact that a path already hamstrings you to a certain play style. And depending on if you say you get a bunch of curse skills, they could force you to have to run a different play style than that character is aiming for, than that character is built for, and can really hamstring you, right? If you get a bunch of melee skills and a highwayman that's a sharp shot, all of a sudden you're in a very sticky situation because you're doing a lot less damage than you were anticipating doing. And before that wasn't really an issue because the relationship system didn't have this effect, and now it is an issue, right? So I think this makes Wanderers more viable because they're much more flexible, right? A Wanderer hero, if you don't know what that means, is just the baseline hero. It's the hero without any modifications from paths. It is them at their base. It is them at their standard, right? And what I think makes Wanderers really, really good now is the fact that they are flexible. So depending on how your run goes, right? Say you get a bunch of bless skills or curse skills, you can change your playstyle and build around that at the beginning of each run or each region much more effectively and not have to worry about the detriment as much. And I think this is actually a pretty cool thing. It makes Wanderers, which I think should be the standard way that you play a hero, much more effective again because of that reality, right? You could get, say, a couple bless skills that they maybe not forced onto your hotbar, but you go, man, those would be really useful right now. I've got a heal, I've got a stress reduction, but if I use those abilities and I have a path, it might really hamstring your play style. But if you're a Wanderer, you might be able to go, okay, I'm going to restructure my team a little bit, especially if they're all Wanderers, move some abilities around, and all of a sudden I've got an extra heal or two, I've got something that gives me dodge plus. I mean, on the mountain, this can be absolutely crazy, right? If you get a bunch of good relationships and you have that flexibility to change your play style on the fly like that, you see those relationships, and all of a sudden, say on Act 3, you're using a bunch of moves that are actually just generating dodge on everybody. Hey, I'm just dodging limerence left and right. It's no longer a problem. It's generating dodge plus every time. That's a 75% chance to dodge. That's huge. That can make a huge difference. But if you're restricted on that because of a path, it can make it a lot more difficult. So, I don't think it's like I mean, I know the video is a bit of a clickbait thumb title. I don't think it's making paths bad, but I do think it makes Wanderers better. And so I wanted to talk about why I think that is such a good thing. And the reason that I think it's legitimately a very good thing is that my issue with paths as they are currently in the game is that they have become a crutch for players. They really force you into a very powerful play style at zero cost to you, the player, at least in the old system, right? Yes, it gave you debuffs, but those debuffs were generally negligible because of the fact that, like, say, again, I'm using the Highwayman because it's a very easy example. On Sharpshot, the debuff is about his melee damage, right? He does less melee damage. He does more range damage. If you're running Sharpshot, you don't care about the melee. You can do minus 100% melee damage. It wouldn't make a difference to you as the player, right? It wouldn't make a difference because of the fact that you're never going to run a melee ability. So the debuffs on paths as they are currently, and as they were in the old system, how they felt wasn't as much like a debuff. It was more just a way to guide you, the player, into understanding how the path was supposed to be played. I think how it works now is because of the restriction combined with the fact that you can end up with forced abilities or abilities that you want to use because of a blessing. It can really put you in a bit more of a risk situation if you're running a path. So when you get to the crossroads and you select your heroes, I really think it definitely makes paths feel more like a risk-reward thing. You go, okay, I can pick this path and I can play this way, and it gives me a really strong play style this way, but it could screw me in the long run and cause me some problems. Whereas I could pick a Wanderer, which is the base hero, and I have that flexibility. And I think that removing that crutch, right? I think paths should be kind of a min-max thing. They should be like, if you're trying to make a very specific build, you're trying to build like, I want the ultimate bleed team, and I want all the best bleed abilities and paths, and I want to try to get all the bleed trinkets, I want to get Beck and Call, and I want to get, I want to make my team just absolutely monstrosities at bleeding. Then yeah, you can go for the paths to get this very niche, like crazy dynamic build. But if you just want to do runs and you just want to kind of get from A to B, especially for new players, I think this is really important, is to take in consideration people who aren't like myself and have like 800 hours in the game. Is new players will be able to feel more powerful and also try more things at less risk if they're more confident taking Wanderers. If it becomes less of a meta to only take the paths, they don't lock themselves into a certain playstyle for a character, and they can try different things. And it's less of an issue. Like right now, or at least as it was in the old system, you pretty much were you unlock the paths and you just never play the hero a different way. The heroes were generally the first thing you'd upgrade. The paths are fairly low on the altar as far as like, how far along they are, at least the first couple paths. And so you just unlock the paths, you never play the hero as a Wanderer again, and then you never really get to feel the flexibility of that hero because you only play them in a certain style. You're only playing a bleed jester versus playing a support jester or a solo finale jester. You're only playing a ranged highwayman, or only playing a melee highwayman, or only playing a yellow hand highwayman, whatever that is. I'm just kidding. Whatever the case is. And I'm really hoping that this new system helps people feel more confident in taking Wanderers again, so that way we can get more of these varied play styles. Because I think one of the issues, and I had this issue in like Darkest Dungeon 1 as well, was that I basically, in Darkest Dungeon 1, I ran the same teams and I ran the same abilities and I never ran anything else, right? I think paths help in making you play different ways that are very niche, but I also want people to play the hero as their most flexible, so that way they can make dynamic decisions as they're playing the game, and that they can make these decisions mid-run, change things up, switch in different abilities, or try to use abilities that are forced on them and make the best of that bad situation. Because I think that's what Darkest Dungeon is all about, is about changing and adapting on the fly, on the run, making those moves. And again, I think with the paths feeling a bit more like a risk now, that ties into the theme of Darkest Dungeon, the series as it is right now, which is that nothing is ever only good or only bad, right? It has to have a downside. If it's got a lot of powerful things, it comes at a risk, right? And again, I don't think the intrinsic built-in debuffs to paths are much of a risk. I think that this new system introduces an external risk to paths that really helps solidify the idea that they are something that you shouldn't just take on a whim. It's something you need to strategize about and go, okay, is this the best call, or is it maybe better to go the safer route and take a Wanderer? So again, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. I don't know, if I'm the only one who feels that way, and I'm probably just rambling here, but I think it's a really good point, and I really hope that Red Hook kind of keeps going down this path where they're not just building the game around hero paths. I think hero paths are an extra. I think hero paths are something that's very, very cool. I'm glad they added them to the game, but I don't want the game to be balanced around them. I want the game to be balanced around the base hero, and then the paths to be something that's extra at a cost. And I think that this helps introduce that cost into the game and get players doing things a bit more flexible and trying to be a bit more dynamic and try different things. So I'm hopeful that this is how it pans out. Let me know what your thoughts are on this, if you agree or you disagree or whatever the case is. I'm happy to hear them all. Again, if you have any feedback and you want Red Hook to hear it, it helps to comment on these videos. Red Hook does read comments on videos like this. It also helps to do comments in things like the Discord and the Reddit. They do read all of those. I'm very passionate about helping this game get to where it should be. I know a lot of people like the new updates, and a lot of people dislike the new updates, and the only way that Red Hook can help build the game to be better is if we all come together and we talk about it and we have this discourse and talk about these things as the player base. So also, if you like this video, do consider subscribing to the channel. It helps me out a lot. We're on the path to 1,000 subscribers, so I can get YouTube partner. That's all we need now, so every single subscriber really helps. And I stream on Twitch 4 times a week playing Darkest Dungeon, so if you you want to come by and talk about these things live with me, definitely consider subscribing to the Twitch channel. Not subscribing, following over there. You don't need to subscribe over there, but follow me over there, and I'd appreciate it. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you very much.